So today in this episode, we're going to be debunking 10 myths about binge eating. So my name is Jonathan, I'm a dietitian that supports people who are struggling with binge eating. Let's get straight to it. Myth number one is binge eating is just the same as overeating. It's not much of a difference. Well, there's actually a clear difference. Overeating is simply you eat a little more than you usually do, but you feel extremely guilty. You feel sick. You feel embarrassed, you feel so disgusted, shameful with yourself. The difference with overeating is, for example, I go to a buffet and then I just eat a large amount of food and I'm quite full, maybe like 9 out of 10 full, 10 out of 10 full. I have a Christmas dinner, I'm so full, I just want to have a nap. Maybe I go to a wedding party and I'm so happy that I start to eat large amount of food, but I don't feel guilty, I don't feel embarrassed. With binge eating, you feel so embarrassed, you feel so shameful that sometimes you even like hide food. You take your crisps and your cookies and then you just bring them to your room to start binge eating. Or maybe you wait until your parents are away from the house before you could start ordering takeaway because you're so ashamed, you're so worried about what other people are going to be thinking about you when you eat a large amount of food, when you start the binge eating episode. So binge eating is heavily determined by guilt, shame and embarrassment whilst also eating a large amount of food. So before I move on to number 2, I want to quickly introduce my binge busting cookbook. If you're struggling with binge eating or you know someone struggling with binge eating and you don't know where to start, what kind of recipes to eat, how much you should eat, when you should eat, what your meals, what your plate should look like or include, then check the link in the description below for the binge busting cookbook. So moving on to myth number 2 is that binge eating is only for people who are overweight or obese. That's very untrue. Binge eating is not because you're weak-willed, lazy, greedy, we often hear that a lot, piggy and all those kinds of things. It's not because of your body weight. Binge eating could lead onto a higher body weight if you're constantly struggling with binge eating, dieting, binge eating, dieting. You're in this yo-yo cycle which actually leads to long-term weight gain. But your body weight has nothing to do with triggering binge eating episodes. It's mostly circumstances and many more. If you want to learn much more of what triggers binge eating, then you can check this video out because this episode, actually, how trauma triggers binge eating. So check that out. But binge eating is not determined by your body weight. If you're underweight, if we're looking at the BMI category, let's say your BMI is below 18, skinny, then you can still struggle with binge eating. There's still lots of evidence that people who are anorexic, they struggle with anorexia, struggle with binge eating. You can struggle with anorexia and binge eating. So what actually triggers binge eating is not laziness, it's actually a survival response. We need to see binge eating as a symptom. It's not a problem. It's a symptom that your body's deprived of calories, or it might be deprived of happiness. Because I can eat chicken, broccoli and rice, plain chicken, broccoli and rice, or like a diet which I really hate and I had to cut out all the happiness from my life. Then I'll struggle with binge eating. If I'm eating, for example, what do I really hate? Cauliflower rice, zucchini, spaghetti, or cloud bread, or cloud pizzas, which is made up of egg whites, then I might be full, volume-wise, physically full, but I have completely no happiness in my life. I don't really enjoy it. So many things could trigger binge eating, so check this video out if you want to learn about what actually triggers binge eating, physical restriction, mental restriction, and all or nothing mindset. So myth number 3, binge eating is because of a lack of willpower. That's completely false. It's not because you're lacking willpower. If anything, people who struggle with binge eating have the most willpower. They stick to this diet so intensely for as long as they can until their body actually triggers a survival response. And when it triggers that survival response, the brain and its need to want to diet completely shuts off. It's in its adrenaline state. So when people struggle with binge eating, when you're eating large amounts of foods, then you have this adrenaline state that like you're just eating so much food so quickly that you're actually eating it for a need to recover your bodily sources or try to get as much calories in as possible. You're not even enjoying it. Sometimes binge eating episodes could be quite enjoyable for the first 5 minutes, and then after that you're just simply watching yourself just pile as much food in your mouth as much as possible because you're in this adrenaline response. Some people start to get even sweaty during binge eating episodes because this survival response, this life or death response is triggered. So no, binge eating is not because of a lack of willpower. It's because you've dieted so intensely for a long period of time that your survivalistic, animalistic, primal response kicks in to get a large amount of food because your body thinks there's a famine going on. So myth number 4 is that binge eating is not that common. Well, if we look at the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, quite a wordful, but basically it's the Bible of definitions for mental disorders. And if you look at the definition of binge eating episodes, you have to eat a large amount of food, which is quite obvious, but you also have to eat very quickly. And then third is you also have to feel disgust, embarrassment, and guilt with yourselves. So I want you to ask yourself, how many times have I struggled with binge eating episodes where I ate large amounts of food really quickly and I felt extreme extreme guilt, shame, and embarrassment. Well, that's actually quite common. That's very, very common, but many people don't want to talk about it. So remember, if you struggle with binge eating episodes quite frequently, that could eventually lead to binge eating disorder, which is a full-blown eating disorder if you get a proper diagnosis. But what I'm trying to say here is it's extremely common. If anything, binge eating disorder is the most common eating disorder in the world. It's not anorexia nervosa, it's not bulimia. If you combine anorexia and bulimia, it's not even close enough to match the number of people who struggle with diagnosed binge eating disorder. But we don't hear that in the news. No one's talking about pandemic, which is binge eating disorder, or binge eating episodes, which is heavily revolving around shame, guilt, and embarrassment. There's lots of awareness with anorexia and bulimia, but not enough with binge eating disorder, because if you struggle with binge eating, many social media influencers are going to say, it's because you're lazy, it's because you're not sticking to the diet plan, it's because of you. It's not the diet plan, it's definitely you who's not sticking to it. You don't want it bad enough. You need to hustle and grind enough if you want to get that six-pack, and all those kinds of really nonsense, silly things. If you're struggling with binge eating episodes where you're eating a large amount of food really quickly and you're feeling extreme guilt, shame, and embarrassment, it's much, much common than you think. And if you're brave enough, I want you to comment below, I struggle with binge eating episodes, to let other people know that it's much more common. And remember, you're not alone with overcoming binge eating. I have a whole set of courses and one-to-one and freebies in the link in the description, but there's also a great community online which you can check in the link in the description, which you can join my Facebook community. So now moving on to myth number 5. Binge eating disorder only affects women. That's very untrue. I used to struggle with binge eating episodes as a man, and studies show that 40% of people who are struggling with binge eating episodes are actually men. And the thing about it is because men heavily underreport that they're struggling with binge eating, or there's not enough awareness. There's lots of this social culture to man up if you're really struggling with binge eating. It's definitely to do with yourself. You're not hustling enough. There are more men who go to the gym and they try to look strong. If they're not sticking to their diet plans, it's often because of them, that they don't want it hard enough. There's so much toxic masculinity about sticking to your diet plan. If you don't want it hard enough and you're not grinding hard enough and you're not going into monk mode or all those kinds of silly things, then it's all because of you. And there's so much red pill nonsense, and if you don't want it hard enough, then you're an incel, and all those silly kinds of things. No, if you're struggling with binge eating, then you need to get help. There are many people who are struggling with binge eating episodes or develop binge eating disorder post bodybuilding competitions. When bodybuilders diet their way extremely intensely to very, very low single-digit body fats towards competition prep, then post-show, after the show is done, they start to develop binge eating disorder and struggle with very frequent binge eating episodes. There's also lots of studies that show post-bodybuilding competitions that these bodybuilders, male and female, also develop bulimia, which is they struggle with binge eating episodes. They feel extreme guilt, like, oh, I just undid all my effort, so now I need to purge it all away. I know this is going to be probably a demonetized video or whatever it is, but we need to raise awareness about the risks of developing binge eating disorder or bulimia. It's not just women who struggle with it. I think men might be struggling with binge eating disorder more because there's so much silly toxic masculinity going on to hold it all in, and they start to struggle with binge eating and they don't tell anyone. It could lead to high cholesterol, it could lead to high blood pressure, and it could negatively affect your life. And then you start to develop a higher body weight, and then you get even more stigma of being called lazy. There's this really silly, disastrous, toxic cycle that men have to go through. And as a dietitian that supports people struggling with binge eating and also struggle with binge eating episodes when I was in university, I think we need to raise awareness of that. So if you're a man and you're struggling with binge eating episodes, then comment below that I'm a man and I struggle with binge eating episodes. Just say that in the comments. I'm a man and I struggle with binge eating episodes. So you can help other men feel quite reassured that they're not the only ones. And there's a great community online. And also, I'll say it once again, if you want to be part of this binge eating recovery community for men, women, or whatever gender you identify as, check the link in the description to join my free private Facebook group. There's around 500 people there, I think. 400, 500, I can't remember now, but there's an amazing community to raise awareness, people to ask questions, to share struggles with. Check that in the link in the description below. Myth number 6 is that you can out-exercise a binge. By that I mean, the myth is, if you struggle with a binge eating episode, and let's say you've eaten 5,000 calories, you just have to go to the gym for like 10 hours so you can cancel out that binge calories. That's actually very untrue, because if you eat 5,000 calories of a binge, it's not going to be 5,000 calories absorbed, because what happens actually after a binge eating episode is you eat a large amount of food and your body temperature actually starts to heat up. So you actually thermalize those foods. You actually burn most of the calories that you've actually eaten. And also there's going to be a large amount of food in your stomach. You're going to feel quite bloated and distended, but actually most of it is actually going to be excreted out. You're actually going to poop it out. But I'm definitely not trying to invalidate that you actually did eat a large amount of food. You definitely did, but what I'm trying to say here is that you can't out-exercise a binge eating episode. You can't live your life in the gym, because there's lots of studies that show that these calorie counting numbers or estimations on treadmills or bikes and all those kinds of things, it's not actually accurate. You're not actually burning that much calories. If you spend maybe like an hour in the treadmill, if it says you've burned 300 calories, it's actually not that true. Actually, only 10% of our total daily energy expenditure is actually determined by physical activity. Me fiddling my hands and like moving my hands and moving my head and fiddling my feet actually burns more calories. What I'm trying to say here is not to fiddle your hands even more, like wiggle around more frequently. I'm trying to say is that you can't out-exercise binge eating calories, because exercise, physical activity, there's no evidence to support that exercising or moving around will actually undo those calories. What you can do is simply to just get on track of eating regularly, being more sustainable with your eating and your dietary habits, eating a high protein diet. The thing is, when people struggle with binge eating for so long, for so many months or so many years, that they got into this habit that when they get the urge to binge eat, there's no gap in between. They just fall into it because they know many times they can't break the urge. So they jump into this binge eating episode. Binge eating episodes are not a choice. It's a symptom. And also, if you want to look at the mental aspect of it, that binge eating disorder, which is the full-blown eating disorder, it's actually a recognized psychiatric condition. You developed this habit of binge eating episodes for so long that it develops into this full-blown binge eating disorder, where it actually changes your psychology. It changes your brain and its dopamine receptors towards binge eating episodes, towards donuts, towards pizza, towards all of your binge foods. And every time you're in the cycle of binge eating and dieting, the only thing going down is not your weight, but actually your self-esteem and your self-worth. And then it becomes a terrible psychiatric condition, binge eating disorder. So it's not a choice. Recognizing that binge eating disorder and binge eating episodes is not your fault can help reduce your reliance and start to develop some self-compassion with yourself, that you're not a slave to binge eating episodes. It's not because of you, and there is always a way to escape binge eating episodes. So myth number 8 is dieting is the best way to escape binge eating disorder or stop binge eating episodes. Actually, I probably should have put this as number 1, because this is really, really important. People think, because of the stigma, that binge eating is the same as overeating, but binge eating is a mental health issue, that if you're struggling with binge eating, it's heavily associated with guilt, shame, and embarrassment, eating really quickly, and it's this animalistic primal response to starvation or not having any satisfaction with your meals. You're heavily depriving yourself of nutrition, quantity, or quality wise. So there's physical restriction where you're eating a very low amount of calories, or mental restriction where you're restricting the foods you love. You're cutting out sugar, cutting out cakes, enjoyment. You go to a birthday party and you say no to cakes. You go to your friend's party with pizza and it's an hangout with pizza. You go to this restaurant where they serve pizza and then you say, no, I'm not gonna have pizza. I'm gonna have the Caesar salad without any Caesar sauce or whatever it is, anything that's high calorie. Then you could be full, but you're cutting out all satisfaction, which could lead to binge eating episodes. So we need to remember, which I've said many times in this video probably, that binge eating is a symptom, and that you're binge eating because your body thinks, oh, there's no food, there's probably a famine going on. In your mind and your eyes, you could probably see all the food in the cupboards, in the fridge, in the freezer. You can see that you have your phone where you can check all the takeaway apps for right at the click of your finger. You could see the pizzas, cookies, donuts, McDonald's, Pizza Hut, Wendy's, KFC, whatever takeaway in the palm of your hands. But more importantly, your stomach doesn't have eyes. It can't see all the availability of food that we have right in front of our doorstep or in front of our cupboards, in front of our eyes. And if it doesn't sense enough calories coming in for your body to sustain itself for a long period of time, it's going to turn on its survivalistic brain and it's actually going to trigger binge eating episodes. You're going to be in this fight or flight response to fight for food. No matter what your brain thinks, no matter what your body wants, its need to look good, to get a six-pack or whatever it is, it's going to be thinking, no matter what happens, I'm going to survive. I need to get that food. I'm going to kickstart Jonathan's brain to find any takeaway as much as I can, eat everything in the fridge, eat everything in the freezers, eat anything that's sweet and enjoyable. I'm gonna jump straight into that as much as possible. So if you're struggling with binge eating, the last thing you want to do is diet. To overcome this binge eating response, you should put dieting on hold until your body senses, okay, there's actually food around. I'm eating food regularly. I'm getting enough calories. I'm getting enough enjoyment. Okay, I'm gonna turn down the knob of binge eating and I'm just going to re-regulate my hunger hunger cues. I'm just gonna calm Jonathan down. And then when you don't struggle with binge eating episodes, then you can start to jump onto a more sustainable, high protein, realistic, enjoyable weight loss diet. But if you're constantly struggling with binge eating quite frequently, whether it's weekly, every other week, if you go more than 3 weeks without binge eating, then I could say you could jump onto a sustainable diet. But if you're binge eating at least once every 2 weeks or once every week, then put dieting on hold. Take a diet break. Myth number 9 is that binge eating is not harmful. That's actually the opposite. Binge eating is quite harmful. It can lead to high cholesterol, high blood sugars. It can lead to a high body fat percentage. If you're constantly dieting and binge eating, that could lead to metabolic adaptation, and then you'll actually gain more weight. It's going to be very, very easy for your body to gain weight because it's turning down its metabolism, and then you're eating a large amount of food. So it's going to be easy for you to gain weight. We can talk about that much more in this episode, why you're gaining weight very rapidly. But mental health wise, you can also struggle with depression, anxiety, self-esteem issues, because there's so much shame, guilt, and embarrassment with binge eating. And if you start to develop a higher body weight and people start to comment on your body weight or bully you, or you start to have this stigma of people not wanting to hang out with you, because let's be honest, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If you're a higher body weight, some friends might actually start to not want to hang out with you. That's the truth that many dietitians and therapists might not want to actually let you know about. And the thing is, those are terrible friends. If they don't love you for who you truly are and they want to be with you because they think you look good or not look good, or depending on your body weight, that's the truth. There is bullying, and it's very, very rife. And we need to realize and recognize the true mental health issues with binge eating, that it could lead to depression, it could lead to self-withdrawal. You're not going to hang out with friends because you're quite embarrassed. You're going to struggle with self-esteem issues. You could struggle with going to the beach, even though right now in the UK, by the time I'm filming this, I think 26 degrees sunny is quite warm. Whatever country you're from, if that's not warm, well, in the UK, 26 degrees is basically Spanish weather for us. It's quite warm, which is why I'm wearing this linen shirt. But many people who struggle with binge eating disorder or binge eating episodes, they don't want to hang out with their friends when it's boiling hot and they want to go swimming. They'd rather just stay inside and make excuses. They don't want to eat a large amount of food and be invited to buffets. They would just stay inside because that's the truth. So I think whilst there are physical effects like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and if you're constantly struggling with reflux, that could lead to what's called Barrett's esophagus, where you actually scar your esophageal tissue because of reflux acid just burning your throat. So there's so many issues, physical issues, but what's more harmful, I would say, is the mental issues, the mental health conditions it can develop. So binge eating is very harmful. So myth number 10 is you can never recover from binge eating. You might have struggled with binge eating for days, weeks, months, even years, maybe even decades, and it might seem like there's no hope at all, but it's completely possible to overcome your binge eating episodes and to never binge eat again. Binge eating is a fully recoverable condition. Just like how any mental health condition like anorexia or bulimia, it's possible to overcome this and fully recover, but it might not be an easy journey if you struggled with it for a long period of time. But your first steps to overcoming binge eating are very, very possible. And if you want to learn how to overcome binge eating, you can explore my channel for many more ways to overcome binge eating. But if you want your first steps to binge eating and you want a blueprint from start to end on how to overcome binge eating, then I have my online course called the Binge Eating Recovery Blueprint, where I'm offering a 93% off for summertime on Binge Eating Recovery Blueprint. You'll get tons of freebies on how to overcome body image issues, the binge busting cookbook, the coping mechanisms guide, how to reintroduce fear foods, and how to eat, when to eat, and what to eat. There's so much I can go on, but you can check the landing page in the link in the description below. But it's completely possible to recover from binge eating. What I'm trying to say is you don't have to buy my course if you want to learn how to overcome binge eating. You can check my whole channel of my most recent videos where I actually go through more in depth of lots of issues like perfectionism, trauma, what to eat, how to overcome weight gain, all those kinds of things. But if you want a fast track, then check the link in the description. But it's possible. I believe every single person could recover from binge eating. There are so many things to uncover, but if there's one thing you could take from this video, if you want your first steps to overcome and recover from binge eating, recognize that binge eating is a symptom, don't diet, and put dieting on hold. Be non-judgmental with eating the foods you love and eat regularly. Eat at maintenance. Don't restrict yourself or don't have any urge to diet. Put dieting on hold and don't be ashamed of it. Eat as if you're not on a diet. So what I tell my clients who are struggling with binge eating is try to eat a healthy diet, but ignore all calories. Try to eat as healthy as you can. So try to eat meals which you completely enjoy. If you want to have salmon with rice and broccoli because you know that's quite healthy, then try to make it enjoyable. Try to eat as healthy as you can. can, but remove the idea that you need to calorie control your meals. If you want to add cooking oil or teriyaki sauce or butter to that salmon to make it enjoyable, to make that healthy eating as enjoyable as possible, then go for it. If you want to create an egg fried rice and you know you're gonna add soy sauce and garlic and a little bit of butter to make that rice, that egg fried rice, really enjoyable, then go for it. If you want to have that broccoli as enjoyable as possible, then feel free to add like butter or mayonnaise or whatever it is. Just remove calorie counting and try to focus on healthy eating, breakfast, lunch and dinner. I know it's a completely whole different video, but check the link in the description if you want to learn how, what to eat and how to create balanced meals to overcome binge eating. So it's quite a long video, but I hope these 10 myths helped to debunk all of the main issues you might be struggling with. And if you know someone who's struggling with binge eating and they feel alone in this binge eating recovery journey, then please share this video and let other people know that they're not alone. Men and women and whatever gender, you're not alone. Everyone can struggle with binge eating. Whether you're underweight, normal body weight, obese, overweight, whatever BMI category, all bodies can struggle with binge eating. Anyone can struggle with binge eating. And there are so many myths that we need to debunk and raise awareness and break the stigma of binge eating. So if you really enjoyed this video, I highly recommend that you check this one out on how to stop binge eating because of your depression. And if you're looking forward to this video, I'll see you there.